don't hear this conversation legalistically.
Mm.
Like, I have integrity if I have workability, and if there's not workability, I don't have integrity. It's a much more fluid process. I think having it as a frame, and that when things aren't working, it gives me a set of questions to ask and a set of things to think about. But when I hold it up like as some rigid, I have it or I don't have it, then it's got to really create some difficulties for you along the way. Hi, I'm Jim Herrington.
And I'm Trisha Taylor, and this is the Leader's Journey podcast.
So, to our listeners, welcome back. This is the first in a series that we're doing that I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking about guiding principles, not just in general, but not all, we're going to be naming some specific guiding principles for us to try on or walk around in. We're also going to be talking about the role that guiding principles play in helping us to manage anxiety. I can say that I believe I ought to be doing this, but when I get anxious, I don't do this. And how do those guiding principles help us grow those internal muscles to have more integrity, more alignment, where our behavior actually aligns with what we say our values or our guiding principles are. We're going to be talking to real people who embody the guiding principles of integrity, of empathy, of welcome, of presence, and of openness. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun one. We get a lot of questions about what guiding principles are and how do we align our lives with them? How do we know which of our guiding principles are maybe solid and which of them are more aspirational and that sort of thing. And so we're going to do a Zoom dialogue on September 16th at 11 Central. I'll let you do the math for your own time zone, but we are going to our Zoom dialogues are just a time for people to come together on a Zoom call and have a dialogue. It really is that simple. People ask me, do you record those? And the answer is no, because it's a real life dialogue where people talk about real stuff. It's not a webinar where one person talks and everyone else is off camera. That doesn't mean that you have to talk, but that you can, and you can listen into other people's thinking. So let me say it again, September 16th at 11 Central.
And you said we, and you mean you and me,
Yes.
and whoever joins us.
And whoever joins us. Yes, that's
Right,
a great
exactly.
clarification. So we may have any number of people. So far, we've had a whole variety of people who have joined us for those on a whole variety of topics. So yeah, I just want to invite you to put that on your calendar and be part of that conversation. Just to clarify for people who are maybe new to this conversation, guiding principles are those bright stars that we navigate our lives by. They are our deeply held values, our most fundamental commitments. They're what we reach for when those togetherness forces are strong. Jim, like you said, when anxiety is rising, and those things threaten to pull us away from being the person that we want to be. And so, yeah, join us for that. In the meantime, we're going to start today's podcast on the first of the guiding principles that we're going to try on and walk around in, and that is the guiding principle of integrity. So, yeah, why are we starting with integrity? Why'd you put this on the list?
I don't know. Maybe because it's just been so helpful, so really trajectory changing, helpful in my own life.
Yeah.
But also because all of us have beliefs or values, guiding principles that we hold, but that we don't live into. Because of what anxiety does, because of the togetherness force. And the integrity conversation gives me like a high level frame for being able to think about why is that so, when it's so, what can I do about that? How do I deal with that? I just find it really helpful anytime I'm working on trying to change my behavior to have a frame that gives me some kind of guidance, and the integrity conversation does that for me.
Yeah. So that word integrity is for some people it's loaded. For some
Right.
people, it just kind of means everything related to being a good person. So when we're using that word integrity in the way that's been so life changing for us,
Yeah.
what are we talking about?
Well, for me, theologically, it comes to a pretty deep understanding of what it means for us to be human.
Mm,
And so when we are doing the integrity conversation, teaching that to groups of people, we would start by saying, the first thing that we know about God is that God creates with God's word. God doesn't wish the world into existence or think the world into existence or hope the world is into existence. God speaks and his word creates. And the first thing we know about ourselves is that we are created in the image of God. And I
yeah.
don't know that I know all of what that means, but
Mhm.
I have to wonder if God creates with God's word, if it also means that we create with our word.
Mm,
And when I first uh, was presented with that idea, it sounded like the person who was saying it was saying, "So we are God,"
mm,
and we're not saying that. But like really simply, if I say to you, Trisha, um, let's meet for coffee next Tuesday at the Starbucks over on Marshall Street, and you say yes, we those words create something. They create an expectation. We begin to make decisions how what we're going to do and not do. We put things in our calendar. We decide what time we're going to leave home. All of those things, and like that's a really simple example.
mm,
And we can go to really large examples where we talk about loving unconditionally.
mm.
And when we use those words, they create some kind of expectation and they create some kind of frame that we can begin to work to live into. So for me, that's the beginning place.
Yeah, I like that so much because every single one of us, I mean, you and me, everyone listening to this, we're trying to create something and we're trying to create something in a context where we believe God is creating. And to think about how that happens and how we participate in that is not always what we think of when we think of integrity. And yet to bring those things together to say, okay, so God created with God's word, let there be light, for example, or
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
different, the promises that God makes.
Right. They
Um,
sometimes take
the,
hundreds of years to be fulfilled.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then I think everyone in this conversation would understand the importance of how we use our own words. And I'm glad you said we're not God. We're not saying name it, claim it. We're not saying like
Right.
if I say something, then God has to fulfill it, or that I am
Right.
going to
Exactly.
speak something into being in the exact same way that God does. But to use your example, I'm so glad that you used a simple example because it really is that simple. And then
Hmm.
also maybe a more complex example like Jesus saying, "Love your enemies," and me saying, I follow Jesus. You know
Yeah.
that
And then
that creates.
exactly. And so what you just did was what I wish I had done when we started this conversation. It's God gives God's word, and we join our word with God's word.
Yeah.
To be able to create something. And so God says, love your enemy. Well, he doesn't like if we affirm that as a guiding principle, he doesn't magically make that happen. We have to do our part in that. Our friend, our mutual friend, John Berryhill, I used to say, there's also some things that only God can do. And there's some things that God won't do if we don't do some things. And in this conversation, it's the putting those together in
Mm.
a way that we're doing our part, God's doing God's part, and the byproduct of that is that we're able to co-create with God the redemption of the universe that we're living in.
Oh, that's big. Okay.
Well, maybe just the redemption of our backyard garden, or
There
maybe
you go.
our family, or
Right.
yeah,
No, but I love that context, and I love that the starting place is the creation story because I think the first way that we think about integrity, or maybe the first definition, would be that things have integrity. We have integrity when we're living into a design. This
yeah,
assumption that things are designed. There is a design for
that's
everything,
right.
and that integrity, wholeness is when we have that, when that's not fragmented, but when the things we do and say and don't do and don't say are consistent with that design. And
Right.
we call that workability. And the simple example of that, right, is driving across a bridge.
Mhm.
Every engineer knows that a bridge has integrity when you can drive across it and not end up in the river below. And so,
Right.
um, you know, the sense that everything in life comes with a design, and maybe not one singular design that we all have to conform to,
Right.
because when we look at creation, I mean, there are like how many thousands of species of flies,
Right. Right.
so
Exactly.
there's lots of variation on the design, and yet
Right.
there's still a design.
Well, a part of what really draws me to this conversation is that where I started with the idea that there is a design for what it means to be human.
Mhm.
I'm created in the image of God, and what does that mean? I grew up in a world where to be human was a bad thing.
Mm.
You wanted to be religious or you wanted to be spiritual, but there's a growing conversation in the culture, both the religious culture and in the secular culture, about what it means to be human. And I think the Bible and the Christian faith gives a very clear answer to that. And so, like, well, I'm struggling to say what I want to say. Um, so there is a design, and if I don't live into the design, then life is not as meaningful and purposeful and joyful. If I live into the design, even when there's suffering and struggle, there's purpose and joy and possibility. And so knowing what the design is to be human, knowing what the design is to be a community, knowing what the design is to be an organization, a company, a church, all of those things, school systems, businesses, like from the smallest fly to the whole universe. We believe there is a design, and that a part of the integrity conversation is being able to see that and then doing our part to work into living into that design.
And
That's
people often
workability.
do push back, right, about the idea of being
They
human.
do.
And I
Hmm.
just want, because we've learned to use that word human, like the part of me I don't like is the
Yeah.
human part.
It's about sex and lust and all
Yeah.
those terrible
Well,
things.
and frailty and failure and yeah,
Right.
those things. And I just think about, but God created us human. There is a design in our humanness. And I just want to come back and say that again.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And we always invite people to push back as well. But I'm thinking about workability in the sense that one of the things I say over and over anytime I'm dealing with like a machine, whether that's my laptop or something
Hmm.
here around the house, not even a machine, just something physical. And I will say, I just want things to work. Right? I mean, like
Yes.
I'm not trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat. I just want things to work. And that's integrity when things just
Yeah.
work the way they are designed to work, including our own lives and including those human systems you were talking about.
I think we want to be careful to say with machines, we want them to work perfectly. When we talk about workability in human systems, we're not talking about perfection, but we
Right.
are talking about living into the design. We're talking about achieving purpose. We're talking about creating creating workable people and systems that function in a healthy way. And we recognize there are going to be breakdowns. In fact, one of the things that I say often about this is don't hear this conversation legalistically.
Mm.
Like, I have integrity if I have workability, and if there's not workability, I don't have integrity. It's a much more fluid process. I think having it as a frame, that when things aren't working, it gives me a set of questions to ask and a set of things to think about. But when I hold it up like as some rigid, I have it or I don't have it, then it's going to really create some difficulties for you along the way.
I'm really glad you said that going into the second definition, because
Yeah.
I think that is very much where people get hung up. And this goes back to the idea of how we use our word. And I just want to apologize to our listeners. I know this sounds kind of circuitous, but we're going to have a resource for you, a just a one page kind of explainer for you that you'll be able to get on our website.
Right.
And I think maybe that will help if your brain is a little more linear than this. But all that to say that the second definition that we like to use is that we do what we say we'll do when we say we do it in the way it was meant to be done. And that
Right.
definition brings together the idea of using our word. It also brings in workability, the way things were meant to be done, the design. Um, and it's both very simple, like you said, we say we're going to meet at Starbucks on Tuesday, and we actually do meet at Starbucks on Tuesday, but it's also really complicated sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah. Around that simple illustration, I do what I've said I'm going to do if I show up, and I show up on time. And I do it in the way that it was meant to be done if I'm there and present. If I show up on time on the right day, but the whole time that I'm there, I'm on my phone, checking the email and not being present to the conversation you and I are having, then I'm not doing it in the way that it was meant to be done. And
Yeah.
so doing what you said you do, when you say you'll do it in the way that it's meant to be done, a shorter frame for me of saying that is giving and keeping my word. I give my word to meet you on Tuesday. And I don't have to say, Trisha, I promise I'm going to meet you on Tuesday. I learn to use my words when I say I'm going to meet you on Tuesday. That's what I do, and then I keep my word by showing up and showing up in a way that our meeting was meant to be done.
And one of the things we do when we get when we really understand that idea is that then we start living our lives in such a small way that we can always do everything we're going to, short of something like, a massive accident on the freeway. I mean, I am going to, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to be there. And yet, in the definition of integrity that we have just been changed by, that's not actually integrity because we weren't designed to live small lives.
Right. Right. And in fact, that's probably the place that I get more pushback in this conversation than almost anything. Uh, if when we're teaching this, what we would say is you are meant to make big promises. You're actually made to make promises that you can't currently keep. And people will just push back and say, "Whoa, whoa! I wake up every morning with a commitment to keeping all my promises." And so, I go to the Bible where the psalmist says that we're created a little lower than the angels and we're given stewardship over the earth. And so there is this, like, how do you have stewardship over the earth? There's this lifetime of learning what workability is and how to do what I said I would do when I said I would do it in the manner it was meant to be done. I was coaching a guy yesterday up in Chicago who hates have to speak in public, but he's on a board where they were having a listening session, and he got called on, and the crowd got a little rough with him, and he was debriefing all that with me the next day, and uh, I mean the crowd got rough with him, meaning some people they raised their voices.
Yeah.
Several people said they didn't trust the board. Nobody hit anybody or anything like that, but
Mhm.
some verbally they got rough with him. And as he was talking about that, he said, I hate doing this stuff, and the conversation shifted when I said, what would happen if rather than your like it's okay for you not to like the kind of pain that brings, but what would happen if you took that as a learning session where if you're going to be an effective leader over a lifetime, you're going to have to learn how to go into those places and do those things well. And you could just see him go, oh. And
Mhm.
then I asked the question, so given what happened last night, what did you learn? And what would you do differently the next time that happened? It was a really meaningful conversation. And at the end of the conversation, I asked him, I said, I want you to give me your word that you're going to find 2 or 3 places between now and the next time we talk where you can actually practice what we've been talking about. And he got this sheepish look on his face and he said, okay, Jim, I don't want to do that, but I'm going to give you my word that I'm going to go practice. And I just think that whole story is a story of what we mean here. There are things we don't know how to do. There are going to be breakdowns. We're not going to be able to practice. We're going to have to practice. We're not going to do that easily, quickly, well, immediately. And so there's this ongoing, never ending journey of growing our integrity.
And that is not the way that we typically think about integrity.
Oh,
And I'm not
oh,
opposed to all the other definitions of integrity. They're really helpful,
right.
but that is not one of them. The idea that I'm going to give my word to something that is so big that I can't currently live into it. Um, just this week, I got my wedding ring back. I almost lost the
Oh,
diamond out of it, but it made me think about the first time Craig put that ring on my finger, 40 years ago this month, by the way. And I thought about, I mean, we just had no idea what it was going to look like to try to live into the promises that we made that day. You know,
Totally.
40 years ago, we had no clue. And we made these big promises because we believed that that was the design for our lives.
Right.
And yet, I mean, we have broken those promises, practiced, like you said, restored, started over so
Gotten
many
into
times.
gotten into counseling, read
Yeah,
books,
right.
gone to
Yes.
classes.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And I think about, everyone listening to this, there are big places where we wanna have an impact, whether that's family, business, church, community, all those things, and there's not a way to do that playing small. We're designed to give our word to big things, and so what we call that, if you're following along at home, is honoring our word, that
Right.
we don't just give our word, and then when we don't keep our word, we just kind of look away, pretend like that didn't happen. We just kind of get increasingly resigned and cynical, but nobody says anything about it. I mean, that's not what integrity looks like. For us, there's a process of actually honoring our word that builds our integrity. And I think this is one of the most helpful tools that we have to
Oh,
offer people.
no question. I have people tell me that all the time. And so the process, we don't usually in our work together do linear things like this and then this and this and then this. But this is a kind of a linear process
It
uh,
is.
that we would encourage you to learn to follow. The first part of the process is that we acknowledge that we didn't keep our word, like with humility and with clarity. We go to whoever was impacted by not keeping our word, who was involved in the conversations, who was involved in the promise to show up for coffee at Starbucks next Tuesday, and we just acknowledged that we didn't keep our word. That's where we began.
Which is hard. I mean, I'd rather just kind of like make excuses or,
Hmm.
put it back onto you. Oh, you
Hmm.
were really expecting that I would do that? Well,
Hmm.
um, and so that
Or blame somebody else. My
Yep.
boss, at the last minute gave me something that
Yeah.
uh,
Ugh.
that that took precedence over this. I mean, all kind of ways that we don't take responsibility.
And the power in saying, this is what I promised, or this is what I intended, and I did not do that is just so powerful. But the
Yeah,
second step is even more powerful in my
it's
mind.
where the magic is. Yeah,
It's where the
and
magic is. And that
exactly.
is our willingness to get present to the impact of this breakdown that we've had.
Hmm.
So, um, even in a small example, like, I don't show up for coffee, there is an impact. And
Hmm.
maybe the only impact is that I wasted your time. But maybe I ask you about the impact and you say something like, well, it feels like I'm not as important in your life as some of these other things. Or, maybe you say to me, well, if it was only once, it wouldn't be a big deal. But do you realize this has happened the last two or three things? And that makes me wonder about the value of our friendship. Or, maybe it's, well, we were going to get some work done today, and now I can't do what I need to do in my life. This is what you tell me because we didn't get to have this meeting.
Right.
And the thing is, it is painful to hear the impact. I don't want to hear it. I want to say, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you say, that's okay. And then
Yeah.
we move on. That's what I really want. I have really come to believe that when there is hurt in a relationship that people just can't get over, it's because we haven't adequately done this step. Either I'm not present to the impact on the other person, or they can't see that I'm present to it.
We do a lot of work with churches and business organizations where the integrity conversation is a part of the culture, is becoming a part of the culture of the organization. And a really important part of that is when you go to someone, when you're creating a culture to be able to clean up messes, it 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 um, it's a little easier if you come to me and say, "What's the impact?" like you just said, my just go-to is going to be, oh, Trisha, no big deal. It's okay. It takes some courage to actually say what the impact is. And if I'm working in a company or I'm in a congregation where this is how we function here, is that we not only ask for the impact, but we tell people what the impact is. I remember the very first time after learning this way of cleaning up messes, the very first time that I said to this person, I want to ask you what the impact is. I know that it's going to be, like you love me and you don't want to say anything that's going to hurt my feelings, but it will help me if you will actually say what the impact was. And so they took me seriously and told me what the impact was. And I could feel myself getting defensive, like right up to here,
Right.
but I had been coached to stay in the
Uh-huh.
conversation. And and I did. And once I got away, I was able to calm down. And when I could calm down, then I could actually listen to what the impact was. And, and what I want to say to you is that, wow, that made such a profound difference for me. The sting of seeing the impact. I don't think most of us wake up in the morning and say, I want to have a negative impact on the people that I love or that I'm connected to or that I'm trying to work with. I don't think anybody does that. I think the impact happens and we don't see it. And this second step gives us the opportunity to see it. And then I think seeing it, the sting of that, the Spirit uses that to keep it alive and to help us to, like, it's back here and we don't see it, but it helps us to get it around here and keep it around here.
And
So
when
that second step
leaders will
of
do
getting
this,
present to,
yeah, when leaders
yeah,
will do this, when parents will do this with their
yeah,
children,
yeah.
and then really listen. Now, the way to absolutely mess this up is to not listen, right?
Oh,
Someone tries to tell me the impact, and I argue with them.
right.
I tell them in some way, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or it shouldn't have had that impact, or but if we can just listen and validate that, whew,
Yeah.
that's so powerful.
It's
And
where the magic
then
is.
the third step, we apologize, we offer that
Right.
heartfelt apology, then we actually know what we're apologizing for. When Craig
Right.
and I were first married, I tend to be a little more reactive than he is, and he's a little more conflict averse than I am. And I would say, I'm frustrated with you. And he would say, I'm sorry. And I would just be enraged by that because how can you say I'm sorry until you
Yeah.
know why I'm upset? But
Yeah.
we kind of do that sometimes when we go too fast to the sorry. And
Well, or the other thing we do is what my brother and I did when we were growing up. My mom would say you're sorry, sorry,
yeah,
and like there's no meaning to it. It's just like I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, and that's equally ineffective. Like the language is you offer a heartfelt apology that actually reflects
uh-huh.
the awareness of the impact.
And that, again, there's just so much power in that. And
Yeah,
then the
yeah,
fourth step in this process, and the last, is that we repromise
yeah.
that we come back and give our word again. And um, sometimes that looks like that we give our word to the same thing again, and
Hmm.
sometimes it doesn't look like that.
Right. Sometimes we've overpromised because I just want you to like me, and so I say I'll do that. When actually I didn't do it. I didn't give it any thought. I didn't have any curiosity about is this something God wants me to give my word to. Uh, and so then in that moment we have to clarify what we're giving our word to. I think the other thing for me that's so important in this conversation, I have a client named Chris who lives over in Austin, and he runs an organization, a business, where he was doing some of this work. He had a 9-member executive team, and he actually courageously asked them for some feedback about misses that he made on a regular basis, and they very courageously told him. And so he took that feedback, did some coaching with me, and went back to them and made some promises about how he was going to show up going forward. And then he said this. He said, the way I've been showing up is deeply habitual, and I am not likely to be able to magically start doing what I'm giving my word to. But I'm giving my word to it. I'm going to do everything that I know how to do. I'm staying in coaching with Jim. I'm reading some stuff. I've signed up for this class. But what I also need from you is when I don't keep my word, I need you to give me feedback. And he said, please don't embarrass me in front of people. But just like when you see me operating out of this old self that I'm trying to give up and trying to live into these new promises, just come say, "Hey, Chris, you did what you used to do," and he said that kind of feedback is going to help me. And I just thought that was brilliant on his part,
Yeah.
because nobody changes deeply held habits by
Mhm.
snapping their fingers. We have to, like, it's a hard, challenging, growth oriented process. And that's the reason we would talk about growing our integrity.
I think that's one reason that when we ask people, someone says, "Oh, I'm going to do this," or "I have this intention," or whatever, and we ask them, "Will you give your word to that?"
Hmm.
They get kind of twitchy because the
This guy did
process
yesterday.
of giving our word and then keeping it, and then when we don't keep it, honoring it and cleaning up our messes and doing that over and over and over, um, that is challenging. And I remember sharing some of this with a group of younger people, and I remember one guy said, "Nobody does this. Nobody taught. This isn't the way people do things." And I told him, I said, "Well, yeah," and then we had a laugh, and I know and am part of or observe people do this. They have taken this on in their organization or their family or their marriage or their um, relationships. And it really does transform those places. And so, uh, I want to ask our listeners to just consider that, you know, I, we can do it as an individual. Absolutely. It can be life changing. And at the same time, um, it's so much easier when we do it with others, when
It
we
is.
bring other people on board and say, what if, as we think about making an impact in the world around us, what if we took on this way of thinking?
Yeah,
And so, there is no way to work on and develop and maintain our integrity. I mean, there just isn't, without someone in our lives that's going to hold up a mirror, that, like you said, that's going to give us feedback, that's going to help us talk things out, help us reflect on what the design is, encourage us to clean up our messes, all those things, help us give our word wisely. We have to have, I think, let me put it this way. I have to have someone to kind of help anchor me in that process.
well, you're saying what I regularly say to myself and to other coaches, I mean, to other people that I'm coaching. If you can change your behavior by just saying, "I'm going to change that behavior," and then you change the behavior, great, you ought to go
Yes.
do that.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you can't change the behavior by just saying you're going to do it, then you need accountability. I've got two or three things that I'm working on in my life right now where I've got some accountable partners who are regularly asking me about that. And so I think you need that. And sometimes what you need is a coach.
Mhm.
You need somebody who's outside your system. Like if you go to somebody in the system, it might make them anxious and it might just increase the anxiety of the system. But you get somebody outside of the system who can do two things. They can hold the tension. On the one hand, they're not going to say, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry about it." On the other hand, they're not going to be legalistically, uh, you know, uh, shaking their fist at you, saying what a bad person you are. They're going to help you do the learning process that grows your capacity to give and honor your word over time. And our whole team, all of our team, this is one of the core values of the way that we do our work together. And so, if you're interested in looking for a coach, go to our website at theleadersjourney.us, and you can. There's a whole list of our team with bios that you can look at. You can pick a coach, or you can just fill out the form and say, assign me to somebody that is available, and we'd love to help you in that journey because I want to say again, this conversation changed the trajectory of my life,
Yeah.
and I love offering, yeah, and I love offering that to other people.
And so, Jim mentioned going to the website. There are a lot of different reasons for you to go to the website. So, theleadersjourney.us. One thing that you'll see there are the links to these podcasts and these series as they're released. But you'll also see a weekly blog post on each of these topics, which I
Mhm.
just think is so important. You'll see the registration for the Zoom dialogue, which we want you to join us for, and you will see the one page a way to get the one-page summary for each of these to help you
Yeah.
reflect. So, yeah, we hope to see you over there soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening today. Take care, and we'll see you next time.